Part 1. The laugh heard across the stars. Expanded explanation minus 1,000 words in the distant reaches of the Milky Way. War had become a science, the Galactic Alliance. A powerful union of over 100 intelligent species had developed weapons and military tactics that were advanced beyond imagination. Battles were fought not with bullets, but with plasma beams, particle cannons, and artificial intelligence-guided missiles. Ships the size of cities drifted through space like gods of war, and planets could be bombarded into silence from orbit. Among these powerful races, humans were new. Earth had only joined the Galactic Alliance a few decades ago. Compared to others, humanity was seen as primitive. They'd only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were considered crude, and their armies small. Most alien leaders believed humans were clever, but weakest for trade, culture, and exploration, but unfit for serious warfare. That belief was about to be shattered. The conflict began when the Kirathi Empire, a brutal species of heavily armored warriors, declared war on the Galactic Alliance. The Kirathi had powerful soldiers, machines with plasma rifles, and warships that could destroy entire fleets. Their military doctrine was simple: overpower everything with force and fire. The Alliance, although confident, knew the Kirathi would be a dangerous opponent. So, in response, they began sending their best soldiers, strongest ships, and most advanced weapons to the front lines. Earth, being a member of the Alliance, was called upon to provide assistance. The Alliance leadership didn't expect much, maybe a few officers or a research team. Instead, Earth sent something unexpected. They sent Captain Miguel Ramirez and a dozen elite human soldiers. When the human team arrived aboard the Alliance command ship Valorous Dawn, other species looked at them with confusion. Humans' war. Simple, rugged combat. Gear nothing high-tech. No power armor, no fancy exosuits. Instead of plasma rifles or particle beams, they carried odd tools that confused everyone. Slingshots. Yes, slingshots. Elastic bands stretched across Y-shaped frames, the kind of thing a child might use to throw rocks. At first, the Alliance command thought it was a joke. Admiral Threxkill, a tall insectoid alien with gleaming red eyes and a long history in war, sneered when he saw the humans' gear. He gestured toward the slingshot one human was carrying. "What are those?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Weapons for hunting birds?" Captain Ramirez calmly answered. "They work." Room erupted in laughter. Several alien officers made bets on how quickly the humans would retreat or die. No one could imagine how a squad of 12 humans with elastic toys could make a difference in a war filled with plasma cannons and war machines. The humans said little. They didn't explain their plan. They just requested to be dropped onto Zenther 4, a moon near the Kirathi front line. It was a key battlefield full of cliffs, narrow valleys, and abandoned mining tunnels. It was a rough, dusty place not ideal for large armies, but perfect for stealth and ambush. The Kirathi had already begun pushing through Zenthar 4, crushing local defenses and capturing supply routes. Their soldiers were like tanks towering, in powered armor, carrying shoulder-mounted plasma casters. They moved in groups with floating drones that scanned the environment and provided targeting data. Ramirez and his team were dropped by stealth shuttle into the rocky cliffs above a narrow valley. They set up in silence, blending into the environment with camouflage netting and natural cover. Then they waited. Soon, the Kirathi arrived. Full convoy of armored troops and machines entered the valley below. Scanners didn't detect anything. They thought the area was clear. That's when Sergeant Danny Lee, one of Ramirez's team, stood up from behind a boulder and fired the first shot. It wasn't a laser or a plasma bolt. It was a small, dark steel ball fired from a slingshot. It zipped through the air with a quiet whiz and landed on the back of a drone. There was a moment of silence. Then chaos. Suddenly the drone dropped out of the air and crashed to the ground. A nearby armored soldier stumbled and fell as his targeting system flickered and died. More systems began to fail, shields dropped, weapons stopped firing, movement controls locked up. One by one, the Kirathi units shut down. More humans stood and began firing slingshots. They weren't just throwing rocks. Their ammunition was advanced steel ball bearings, enhanced with custom-made electromagnetic pulse charges. When these small, seemingly harmless spheres hit a machine, they overloaded its electronics without causing any visible damage. It was brilliant. The slingshots had no energy signature, so they couldn't be tracked. They made no sound, so they didn't give away the human's position. They used old-fashioned mechanics, which meant nothing the Kiratheid could block or counter them. The Kirathi panicked. Their leaders screamed orders, but their command systems failed. Their suits locked up, their drones dropped. And up above, the humans just kept launching one tiny steel ball after another, simple, silent, and devastating. From orbit, Admiral Threxkill watched the battle through surveillance feeds. His mandibles twitched in disbelief. What is happening? He muttered. An officer next to him said, "The Kirathi forces are non-functional. They appear to be under attack from unknown projectiles. No energy signature, no explosions." Threxkill stared at the screen, his pride wounded. The humans had done what no other force had crippled and armored. Kirathi division without firing a single energy weapon. Back on the ground, Ramirez grinned behind cover. He tapped his cum. First wave neutralized, ready for the next. Humans melted back into the terrain like shadows. The slingshot, once the object of ridicule, had just become the most feared weapon on the battlefield, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming next. Part 2. First Contact expanded explanation, minus 700 words after their surprising success on Zenther 4. Captain Miguel Ramirez and his small human team became the subject of whispers across the battlefield. The other species in the Galactic Alliance weren't sure what to make of it. Some thought it was a fluke. Others believed humans had used some unknown advanced technology. But most were still skeptical. The Kirathi, however, took it seriously, embarrassed by their failure. They doubled their efforts and sent an elite combat unit into the valleys of Zenther 4 to wipe out the humans. These new forces were better equipped, faster, and supported by high-end aerial drones. The Kirathi commanders were certain this time would be different, but the humans had already moved to the next phase of their plan. Captain Ramirez's team now controlled key ridges and tunnels overlooking the Kirathia's main route through the valley. They had studied the terrain, set traps, and waited patiently. They didn't have the numbers or weapons to win a fair fight, but humans didn't fight fair. As the Kirathi convoy rolled in, all sensors showed nothing unusual. The area was quiet. It's too quiet. Then, at the perfect moment, Sergeant Danny Lee launched another shot from her slingshot. It looked harmless, a tiny black ball arcing through the air, landing with a soft tap on the hull of a Kirathi walker unit. 1 second passed, then the walker froze. Its joints locked up, its weapons went dead, and the lights on its armor blinked out. The same thing began happening across the convoy. Drones spiraled down. Tanks shuddered to a halt. Communications went silent, confused. The Kirathi scrambled to find the enemy, but there were no laser blasts, no plasma bolts, just silence. And failure, the tiny black balls weren't ordinary projectiles. They were EMP electromagnetic pulse rounds, custom-made by human engineers. The humans had taken simple steel ball bearings and added powerful micro-EMP charges inside, then wrapped them in carbon nanotube shells that stuck to metal on impact. In a war where everything relied on electronics, plasma weapons, drones, armor, targeting systems, these EMP balls were devastating. And the slingshots, they were ideal, completely analog. No energy signature, no electronics. They couldn't be detected by scanners or jammed. No one had prepared for such a low-tech threat, and that was exactly why it worked. Ramirez's squad moved like ghosts. They fired a few shots, caused chaos, and disappeared before the Kirathi could respond. Their camouflage made them blend into rocks and cliffs. Their movement was fast and quiet. Their impact was huge. Alliance observers couldn't believe what they were seeing. From the command ship Valorous Dawn, Admiral Threxkill received the battle reports. His claws twitched in disbelief as he listened to the recordings. There were no plasma blasts, just faint slingshot sounds, and the collapsing systems of the enemy. Impossible, he muttered. They're disabling entire Kirathi divisions. With toys? One of his aides replied. They're not toys, sir. They're weapons disguised as toys. Back on the ground, Ramirez crouched behind a jagged rock, watching through a pair of binoculars. Beside him, Private Chandra giggled as another drone dropped from the sky with a soft thud. Like shooting ducks at a carnival, she said. Ramirez smiled. That's the point. Give them a target they don't respect. They won't protect. Against it, the key to human strategy was simple. Turn their weakness into a strength. Everyone expected advanced tech. No one expected a slingshot. When the smoke cleared, the Kirathi convoy was gone defeated, not by plasma or power, but by a dozen humans with slingshots and physics. Later, a captured Kirathi commander asked through gritted teeth, "Why slingshots? Why not guns or lasers?" One of the humans shrugged and said with a smirk, "Because those you'd be ready for." The message was clear. Humanity didn't just bring a weapon, they brought the unexpected. And that, more than anything, was what made them so dangerous. Part 3. Guerrilla Shadow's expanded explanation minus 700 words as news of the human victories on Zenther 4 spread. The rest of the Galactic Alliance was stunned. A small team of humans, armed with what looked like children's toys, had defeated 2 Kirathi armored divisions. But it wasn't just the tools that surprised the galaxy, it was how the humans used them. The Kirathi Empire had always relied on overwhelming strength. Their soldiers wore power armor, carried heavy plasma weapons, and were supported by advanced drones. Their strategy was to strike hard and crush the enemy fast. But against humans, that strategy failed again and again. Humanity didn't meet the Kirathi head-on. They didn't use big guns or powerful ships. Instead, they vanished into forests, climbed mountains, and slipped into underground tunnels. They struck fast, then disappeared before the enemy could respond. This was guerrilla warfare. The Kirathi had no answer for it. On the rugged planet's surface, Ramirez and his team moved like shadows. They avoided roads and open fields. Instead, they used the terrain cliffs, caves, and storm-blasted hills to hide and strike with precision. The Kirathi would patrol an area, find nothing, and then lose an entire squad to a few well-aimed slingshot rounds. These weren't just simple marbles either. The humans had begun modifying their ammo. Some ball bearings were magnetic, able to stick to enemy armor before releasing an EMP pulse. Others had micro-explosives or chemical tags that could mark targets for later ambushes. The Kirathi grew paranoid. They stopped trusting their drones. They avoided valleys. They even began taping wires and mirrors to their armor to try to detect sneak attacks. Nothing worked. In one famous encounter, Kirathi wore mech, 3 meters tall and armed with twin plasma casters, entered a rocky canyon. It was one of their most feared machines. It's designed to wipe out infantry in seconds. It never saw the human. From a ledge 40 feet above, Corporal Juno loaded her slingshot and fired a marble-sized device into the mech's shoulder joint. 1 second. Later, the mech shut down mid-step and toppled like a tree. The humans didn't cheer or celebrate. They just moved on, leaving the wreck behind as a warning. Meanwhile, the rest of the Alliance began to notice a shift. Kirathi forces, once unstoppable, were now avoiding certain zones. Maps began to show areas labeled unstable, human. Activity reported. Alliance commanders had never seen anything like it. The humans were winning ground not by holding it, but by making it dangerous to enter. Admiral Threxkill, watching from orbit, couldn't believe what he was reading in. The reports. They are 12 soldiers, he muttered. 12. His aide, a young intelligence officer, answered. 12 humans? Admiral? That's different. The humans had given their mission a name. Operation David, a reference to an old Earth story about a boy who defeated a giant with a slingshot. It was fitting. Oh. Every Kirathi unit they took down was another Goliath falling. When interviewed later by a Varnock journalist, Captain Ramirez explained, "The galaxy thinks power is about size, firepower, and numbers. But real power is adaptability. You can't jam a rock. You can't hack a rubber band. And you can't win a war if you don't know where your enemy is. The Kirathi were losing more than battles, they were losing confidence. Their soldiers began hesitating in the field. Their commanders requested reinforcements constantly, and all because of a few humans using weapons no one took seriously. The phrase, "Don't get slingshotted," became a dark joke among both sides of the war. But for the humans, it was no joke. They weren't just fighting with slingshots. They were fighting with creativity, strategy, and fear. And so far, they were winning. Part 4. Counter-Strike Expanded Explanation -700 words. The Kirathi Empire had been humiliated again and again by a handful of human soldiers using slingshots and primitive tactics. The situation had become a nightmare for them. Their machines failed, their elite units vanished into the dust, and their confidence was crumbling, desperate to change the tide. The Kirathi launched their most aggressive counterattack yet. Their new target was Vorten 9, a rich mining world in Alliance space. This planet provided critical rare metals and energy resources needed for the war effort. If the Kirathi captured it, the Alliance would lose a vital supply line. They sent 3 full divisions, tens of thousands of soldiers, tanks, drones, and heavy air support. It was a show of force meant to overwhelm the defenders quickly. But they didn't know that humans were already there. Waiting Captain Miguel Ramirez had been sent ahead of the invasion. With a larger team, 120 human soldiers trained in unconventional warfare. Like his original squad, they brought gear the rest of the galaxy still mocked: camouflage suits, slingshots, handcrafted traps, and new magnetic ball bearings loaded with customized EMPs and microbombs. What the humans lacked in firepower, they made up for in preparation. The terrain of Vorten 9 was harsh. Its surface was covered in magnetic dust storms, jagged mountain ranges, and deep cave systems. Perfect for stealth. Perfect for ambushes. Perfect for humans. Ramirez and his team partnered with the planet's engineers and local miners, turned old machinery into traps, converted mining coils into makeshift turret slingshots, and modified environmental sensors into early warning systems. The planet became one massive trap. When the Kirathi landed, they met no resistance. At first, their scanners detected nothing but rocks and metal. Their soldiers moved confidently, marching into the valleys and through the abandoned mining tunnels. Then things started going wrong. A massive troop. Transport hovered into a canyon, then dropped from the sky. It wasn't hit by a missile. Instead, a small steel marble had been flung from the cliffs and struck the transport's navigation sensor. Elsewhere, an entire armored platoon came under attack, not by bullets, but by dozens of tiny slingshots. Rounds, each carrying a different effect. One disabled vision sensors, another disabled movement joints, and another exploded with enough force to rip off a leg plate. In one dramatic moment, Kirathi command mech was spotted trying to retreat. A human scout positioned on top of a collapsed mining shaft pulled out a slingshot with a double band design and launched a special marble. Filled with reactive fluid, it hit the mech's back. A split second later, the fluid ignited with the surrounding magnetized dust, causing a flash explosion that knocked the mech flat. The Kirathi were stunned. They had brought their best soldiers, their most advanced gear. And yet again they were being destroyed by primitive tools. Meanwhile, Ramirez stood in a mobile command tent, reviewing maps lit by soft red light. "They're still using power systems with no shielding," he said. "They think overwhelming force is the answer. Let's show them otherwise." He ordered squads to set up ambushes at every natural choke point. In the narrow canyons, they built slingshot turrets. In the tunnels, they rigged traps with tripwires and non-electronic pressure triggers. Everywhere the Kirathi advanced, something failed. Sometimes it was a slingshot. Sometimes it was a magnetic charge dropped from above. Sometimes it was simply the fear of being watched. Admiral Threxkill, still orbiting above the battlefield, received a status report from Ground Command. "Sir," the officer said, stunned, "the Kirathi assault force is breaking. They're requesting extraction." The admiral blinked. "How many human troops?" "Only 120. Armed with," he paused, embarrassed, "slingshots, sir." Threxill stared at the display, then gave a slow, respectful nod. "They've made the galaxy rethink war." By the end of the week, Vortenine was secure. Humans didn't just hold the line, they shattered the Kirathi assault. The planet, once a quiet mining world, was now famous for being the place where plasma weapons lost to slingshots, and humanity's legend only grew. Part 5. Victory by Ridicule. Expanded explanation minus 700 words. The battle for Vortenine ended in complete humiliation for the Kirathi Empire. Their mighty forces, 3 full divisions, had been repelled by a mere 120 humans armed with slingshots and clever tactics. The rest of the Galactic Alliance was stunned. What began as a curiosity had turned into legend. Across the galaxy, images of humans with slingshots spread like wildfire. Videos showed Kirathi tanks shutting down after being hit by a marble. Memes and murals appeared on space stations. Even alien school children started calling their slingshots Earth weapons. A once joked about item was now a symbol of terrifying precision and creativity. But to the humans, it was never about Famit, it was about results. Captain Miguel Ramirez stood at the edge of a canyon on Vortenine, watching the last of the Kirathi dropships retreat into orbit. Around him, his soldiers quietly packed up their gear. There were no loud celebrations, just the satisfaction of a mission completed and lives protected. Ramirez keyed his comes. "Operation David is complete. No casualties. Area secure." He looked down at the slingshot holstered at his hip. It wasn't special, not by Earth standards. It had no AI, no fancy engineering, just rubber, steel, and practice. And yet, it had defeated plasma, armor, and fear. Back on the galactic capital, world of Terry's Prime, special assembly was called at the Alliance Hall of Valor. High-ranking officials from every member species gathered in silence. At the center of the stage stood a single object on a pedestal, a worn-out slingshot. The crowd remained still as Admiral Threxill, once a loud critic of humanity, walked to the podium. "We underestimated them," he began. "We thought them primitive, foolish, childish. But we were wrong." He turned to look at Ramirez, who stood at attention in full uniform, his helmet tucked under one arm. "Humans have taught us a lesson we forgot. War is not won by the strongest weapon, but by the smartest mind." Thunderous applause followed. The slingshot on the pedestal would later be placed in the Galactic War Museum, the plaque, the weapon that changed the war. The Kirathi Empire, once feared for its strength, was now laughed at across star systems. Their defeat by what was seen as a rubber band and a rock became a source of endless mockery. Their propaganda machines tried to spin the loss as sabotage or dishonorable tactics, but no one listened. Their enemies had adapted. They hadn't. One Kirathi general, in a bitter interview, growled, "We had the greatest machines in the galaxy and we were brought down by children's toys." He wasn't wrong, but for humans, it was never about looking foolish or clever. It was about survival. About knowing that when you're the smallest species in a room full of giants, you win not by matching their size, but by outthinking them. "We don't fight for pride," Ramirez once said in a later interview. "We fight to protect. We fight to win, and we use whatever works." That mindset changed the way the galaxy viewed humanity. No longer were they the underdogs. Now they were the unpredictable ones, the dangerous ones. Not because of their weapons, but because they could win without them. After the war ended, as an Alliance historian summed it up best, in a galaxy obsessed with firepower, it was a slingshot. That reminded us, all true power lies in the hands that pull it. And from that day forward, every major alien military began preparing not just for brute force, but for humans. Because somewhere out there, hiding behind a rock, might be someone with a slingshot and that was enough to make any commander pause.